If you've ever lost your shirt on a job but learned a ton of lessons, then that is exactly what we're talking about on this week's episode of Build the Business. So, Robert, when I say a time that I lost money but learned a lot, what comes to mind for you?
Boy, I have a lot of those examples, but the one that comes to mind first is about 10 years ago. I was running a construction company and a garage door company, two different companies in parallel, and also had my fingers here at Western, kind of in here a little bit. Wasn't running it, wasn't involved with the day-to-day, but was a partner in it. And so I took on this garage door job. And so to preface this, didn't have a lot of background in garage doors and didn't have a lot of experience in the garage door space. And so it was a need that was present where we were living, and I kind of jumped into that space and was just learning on the fly. And it's not a horribly complicated business or thing to do, but there are tricks of the trade, and there are things that you need to have basic skills at to make doors work well. And so we were learning those things, and I don't even remember how I got the contact, but I ended up with an opportunity to bid a job at a natural gas pumping station about an hour away. And there were a couple very notable things about this job. The one is it was an environment in which I had no experience. Operating in that sort of environment with the safety protocols they had, with kind of the things they allowed or didn't allow, like they would throw you off the job site if they saw an empty energy drink can in your truck. And, heaven forbid you showed up with a knife or an empty shell casing on your floorboard. So it was just a different environment than I was used to operating in, and I was willing to jump into it. And so I jumped into it. I accepted the opportunity to bid. I bid the job, and I knew enough to know that this space was going to cost a lot more money to operate in, because we couldn't operate the way we normally did, and just different ways of doing things, and efficiency would slow down. And so it was a 14-door job. And here's the other notable thing: it was all rolling steel. And
How different is that than your typical garage door?
It's a lot different than a typical garage door. Typical sectional doors don't really need specialized equipment to put them in. You can handle everything by hand. If you have a ladder or a scissor lift, you're good to go. Sectional doors, you have to have a forklift of some fashion to lift up the doors. They're really heavy. And these were insulated doors, so they were kind of double heavy. Mm-hmm. And so they had a double layer of steel with insulation between. And the interesting thing about this job is all of the doors had to be serviced from the outside. So within a couple feet of the door opening, sometimes 3 feet, sometimes 10 feet, was equipment that was already placed and semi able to be operational. And so we couldn't actually get the forklift inside to set the doors. It all had to be done from outside, and the doors are wider than the openings, and these were interior mount doors. And so we had to build some specialized equipment to be able to basically pick the doors up on a cradle and turn that cradle so the door could go in and then turn it back straight. And so those were some really challenging things, and everything was sloped, and scissor lifts, you'd go up and they would start beeping because they were out of level. And even if they would go up, they'd be 3-4 feet away from the door because of the angle of the concrete. And there was all of these things going on, right? And so me being me, I'm like, yeah, we can do that. And so bid these 14 doors, and best as memory serves me, it was about $350,000 for the bid. Biggest door bid I had ever done, hands down, bar none. And one of the interesting things here was all of the door motors, every door had a motor, and all of the door motors had to be intrinsically safe, and NEMA 7 on top of that.
What does that mean?
So basically intrinsically safe is that they're explosion proof. So if any fumes make it to the motor that have the potential to explode, like a gas fume, that there's no ability for that fume to get into the motor and cause an explosion when a motor starts or stops through a spark.
Sure. Makes sense if you're in the oil and gas
Yeah.
side of things.
Yeah, for sure. And I had never dealt with intrinsically safe motors. And so here's where I messed up. Somewhere along the way, and I'm a pretty detail-oriented guy by nature, but somewhere along the way, I missed the detail that these motors were to be 480 volt, 3-phase. And I ended up ordering these motors as 240 volt, single phase. And there was a massive wait time for these motors, and this was way pre-COVID, right? I mean, way before COVID. And I think the wait time was like 8 weeks or something on these motors, and had to be built, like nobody stocked these. These were special one-offs. So we start installing doors. We wait for the motors to show up. The motors show up. We start installing these motors. The electricians come behind us and start wiring these motors, and it didn't take very long to realize I had the wrong voltage motors. And man, this is like a real problem. Like, there was no movement. These motors had to be 480 volt, 3-phase. So
And I'm guessing the supervisors on the job weren't too inclined to be patient about the matter.
yeah, so no patience. They're on a schedule. I'm on a schedule, their schedule. And they really don't care if I ordered the wrong product or not.
Yeah.
What they wanted was the right product, and they wanted it yesterday. So I ordered new motors, and I don't remember the exact amount, but it was about $7,500 a motor, 14 motors. It was north of $100,000.
Wow.
And that was more than my profit in the job by about $40,000. So ended up, I couldn't send the other motors back. They were specially made for me. So I was stuck with these wrong voltage, intrinsically safe motors. I had to cough up the money for the new motors. And so basically what happened is, because I missed a detail and I didn't pay attention and I didn't catch and verify and have them sign off on what I was ordering, I lost more than $40,000 on this job. And I was a very young company, didn't have a lot of assets, didn't have a lot of cash, and man, it really rocked my financial world. Fortunately, I was busy with work, and so I was able to kind of cash flow through my problem and climb on top of it. And we got to the other side of it, but man, like, that job really stung, especially early on in kind of my garage door career. And I've got this sticker on my coffee cup here, a little cruising cap that says, "In everything give thanks." And the thing that I'm thankful for about that job is that I learned that lesson. Yes, it was a lot of money, but I learned that lesson really well. And it was with a company that ultimately showed me some mercy on the timelines, and they worked with me, and they appreciated how I showed up and took care of the problem. I didn't try to upcharge them. I didn't place blame. I acknowledged the responsibility, and I finished the job as quickly as possible. I prioritized their needs, even while I was massively losing money. And so a couple takeaways for me was, I missed some details. I left money on the table with that job. I probably could have charged, looking back, probably another $100,000. Probably could have gotten $450 for that whole job. So I left money on the table by not understanding my industry well enough, which, I was learning. It was the first job of that sort of space that I had entered. The plus side is that I learned that I wasn't charging enough, and I went on to work for this company for the next couple of years, and I actually followed them all around the US, and we worked in pumping stations and oil jack sites, New Mexico, West Texas, Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, Ohio, and followed these guys around. We developed a very good relationship and a high level of trust based on how I handled that first job. And I made that loss back in spades. I made so much money with that company, it was unbelievable. A lot of days I made my losses back in 1 or 2 days' time, following them around. And it was because of how I showed up in that space and cared about the problem and took responsibility for that problem. And I took lessons away from that I've been able to apply over and over and over. And even outside of that company, working in other industrial spaces like power plants and things like that, I went in with a knowledge of the environment in which I was operating and the way I needed to operate and show up within that, and also the way in which to quote something so that it was profitable and there was buffer built in for me if things go wrong, and they almost always do in that space. It's very rare that you get in those environments and everything goes according to plan. And so there's this kind of automatic built-in price buffer that exists in that space that I wasn't aware of. And so that very first job, I'm really thankful for, because it really articulated me into being a very profitable door company, which I went on to sell later. And so ultimately, it was very much for me, this loss, even though it threatened my very existence as a business, but it was ultimately for me. And I took those lessons and applied those forward and made that back many-fold over.
You mentioned a couple of times that this is early on in your garage door career. What made you get into garage doors alongside of doing construction?
Yeah, so we were building pole barns, and there was a need for garage doors to be installed. And I had kind of grown up with a bias that garage doors were kind of a terrible thing to do, and they were confusing and difficult. And I remember the pole barn we were on that we were building, and it needed these, I think it was 3 20 by 14s installed, insulated, steel-backed, vinyl insulated garage doors. I think they weighed, 1,200 pounds a piece or something. Big doors, had big torsion bars, big springs. They were pretty difficult doors to start on. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to step into this. I'm going to figure it out. And I think it took us 6 hours to install that first door. The first door I'd never done in my life. And it was put that up. Oh, that's not ready yet. Take it down. Let's do the next part. And it was like that the whole way through. And learning how the springs went on and how the cables go on and how to get the door to roll level and, work smoothly. And the door is still operating today. I drive by it occasionally. But 6 hours for the first door, took us 3 hours for the second door. And I think we did the third door in 1 hour and 45 minutes. And so one of my takeaways from that has always been is that it seems like I step into new things in one of the hardest areas possible. So one of the more difficult doors, not the most, but a very difficult door to install in kind of the garage door world. Those 20 by 14s insulated. In fact, I think they even had dual torsion bars connected with a drive chain. So kind of some complicated stuff going on. And then when we stepped into rolling steel, it was a very difficult job with very difficult environment, difficult installs, a bunch of them, high dollar amount, high exposure, high risk. And yeah, we lost heavily, but man, we learned extremely quickly, and it really got us up to a very profitable place very quickly. And so your main question of, why get into garage doors, it was because of a need that was present, and I had a belief that they were beyond me. And I finally decided to step in, and I'm like, no, they're not beyond me. It's just, this is actually not that hard. Just need to step in and do it, and this complements what I do already very well.
Yeah, so with having that bias and then taking that huge loss on the rolling steel job, did it, and if so, how did that affect your confidence at the time in that space?
Yeah, it did affect my confidence at some level. Like, I questioned my ability to do this. And I also knew that I had a responsibility to fulfill the obligation. And so that kind of was the overriding driver to my confidence of myself. Like, the need to fulfill that was greater than kind of the level of self-bashing that I went to around that. And so since I've been able to change those lenses and those belief systems to be a lot more effective in those failures and really understand. And I think it really takes experiences like that for me to really solidify the value of picking up a different lens or belief system to serve me in that space. So I could look at it as this was to me or this was for me. And back then, I really would have viewed that a lot more as this is happening to me. And today I realize that no, these things happen for me.
If someone's going through or has recently gone through a loss like this, where they're taking a financial hit, maybe it's affecting their livelihood, their confidence, their own voices in their head. Knowing what you know now, how would you walk someone through that space to understand that, yeah, these are lessons for me, not to me, taking up responsibility, like you said, rather than playing the victim card. And yeah, that can be a difficult space to navigate. So what would you tell someone if they're going through that now or recently have gone through that? I guess what would you tell your younger self? If you 10 years ago was sitting in this seat, how would you walk him through that experience? Because not everybody understands or is aware of the responsibility and the victim mindset and how that plays a part in their bias and in their head. Yeah, so victimhood is anytime I blame an external circumstance for what I'm going through. And responsibility is understanding that I have responsibility for why I'm at, for why I am where I am, why I am where I'm at. And so for me, it would be understanding that, like, I chose to bid this job. I chose to not bring on an expert because, I viewed it as too expensive or unobtainable, and I didn't even explore it. There was resources available to me. Had I went looking, I would have found them. And so, understanding that I hold that responsibility because of choices that I made, and that's why I'm there. So when it comes to going through hard things, if there's a swamp ahead of me and I decide I need to walk through that swamp to get to my objective on the other side, then I must also know that going through the swamp, I'm going to get mud on me. And if halfway across, I'm so deep in the mud that I'm having to bounce off the bottom to get a breath, and at that point, I decide to quit because the pain is too much and the path is too hard, and I go back,
then all of the mud I have on me, all of the crap that's on me, and all of the pain I went through to get there was for nothing. Like, I didn't take a lesson away from that. And that's often what happens in victimhood, is a turning around and going back to the comfortable or the safe or the known. Even if it wasn't serving me well, it's known. And so often we want to live in a known space because while maybe it doesn't serve us, it's comfortable.
It's the devil we know.
Yeah, it's the devil we know. And so for me, my advice, if you will, is like, when you're in that swamp and you're bouncing off the bottom and you can't breathe, like, are you willing to keep going? Are you willing to persevere through the pain, through the mud, through the crap, through the hardship of it all, to get to what you said your objective was on the other side? And once you do that, there's often tools over there, I have found, that if you have to traverse that swamp again, it's often not in the same way. Maybe there's a boat over there that you can paddle back and then go back, right? Or, that's been my experience, is that there's something that I gain that allows me to traverse that much easier. But also understanding that there's a continual path of swamps ahead of us. It's not, I cross this swamp, I'm done with swamps. It's, no, there's a bigger swamp ahead of you, and I'm going to apply the tools and the mindsets and the perseverance that I gained in this swamp to that swamp, and it's probably going to push me to my limits as well there. And so there is no finish line, and it is taking the things that I've learned and applying them forward. But if I'm in victimhood, then I'm not able to take the things that I've learned and apply them forward. I just stay in my original swamp, and I just keep those waters stirred up, and I never actually get to where I say I want to be, or to be who I say that I want to be.
Yeah. When you said you're going to get mud on you, it made me think of an analogy our friend Jeremy McWilliams often says, is the person that wins in a knife fight is the one that's willing to go into the knife fight, willing to get cut, and knowing he's going to get cut. Those are often the people that come out of the knife fight successfully. So the other thing I'm hearing in this, which, me and John Miner on our last episode kind of talked about this. In that episode, we talked about really finding the identity of your company and your lane, and making sure that you stay within that so that you're profitable, you're successful. And if something's outside your lane, you're getting that to somebody who that is their gift. And what I'm hearing in this one as well kind of correlates in my mind, which is, the responsibility, the discipline. You made the commitment, you're going to finish this job, and that commitment and that responsibility that you carried outweighed the money and the hits you were taking. And so I think those kind of go hand in hand. Is like, who do you want to show up as? What kind of company do you want to run? One of high integrity and discipline. And discipline is often keeping the commitments that we've made to ourselves. And so in the story you told, that's what I hear a lot of, is you kept the commitments that you made. And that's a high level of discipline, especially when you're losing, 40,000 plus on a job. I mean, that's no joke, especially as a small contractor. I mean, that could be more than you had in the bank to float, and you had a young family at the time, and putting food on the table, and employees to take care of, and all that. So,
talking about your strengths and your weaknesses, like, boy, I had to learn this lesson the hard way. Growing up, I had developed this belief or this mindset that I had to hire people who were as good as I was, or nearly as good as I was, like say 75% or 80% as good as I was at things. And I carried that in the business for quite a few years. And all of a sudden I realized is that that is an incredibly flawed belief system, because I picked my head up and looked around and I had a bunch of people really good at all the same things and neglecting a lot of really important things. And it was a real paradigm shift in my mind, because all of a sudden I realized that, yes, I need some people to maybe help me in my strengths so I can back away and not be, in it every day. But more importantly, I needed to hire my weaknesses, not hire my strengths. And so it was a complete 180 in my thinking. So I began to hire my weakness. And I'm still learning this lesson. There's still areas of weakness showing up this week that I don't have the people in place for that should be. And you can't do it all at once, right? It's steps. And you can't skip the steps. If you skip the steps, you will come back and learn it at some point. And I'd rather do it at a lower level than a higher level. I'd rather do it at 10 million than 50 million. I'd rather do it at 50 million than 100 million. And so I'm always grateful for the lessons when they come, and I never want to shy away from them and try to put that off, because I've just learned so deeply. I'm so bought out on the idea, or sold out, bought into the idea that I want to learn these lessons as soon as they present themselves. And sometimes I'm pretty hard-headed, so sometimes it might take me a hot minute to learn it, or to admit it, or to even realize it's a thing. But everybody arrives on time, and I eventually get there. Maybe slower than I would like sometimes. But the value of hiring my weaknesses is I'm able to have people around me that point them out quicker and quicker and quicker. And so what I found is that process loop gets shorter and shorter, where before it might have been a couple of years on a problem. I try to shrink that thing down to, a couple months or a couple weeks or a day, just depending what the problem is, and just shrink that time so that I can get where I want to go faster.
Yeah, that's great. What would be some key takeaways that someone could apply to their life or their business today, so that they didn't have to go through that experience, or at least reduce the pain of the experience they're going through? What would be a couple takeaways that you would have to offer for someone experiencing that?
Yeah, so I think it's important, at some level, it's important for us as humans to go through experiences, because it's one of the ways that we gain judgment and wisdom. And there kind of comes a point where we can apply other experiences forward. So for instance, if I'm 3 and my mom tells me not to touch the hot stove, and I touch it, I learn that it's hot, and now I have burned fingers. I can now take that experience and I can apply it not just to the cooking stove, but to the wood stove and the pellet stove and the gas stove in the corner, right? And so it's important to go through experiences, and you don't want to keep going through the same experiences, right? And there's some lessons that I think, for me, as I've learned some really hard lessons, there's people who have spoken in my life, and sometimes I didn't understand it. I didn't appreciate the value of it, because I didn't have the experience in another area to back it up. And so I didn't fully understand why. And as I've grown in my experiences and in wisdom and discernment, I've learned to realize that, okay, I may not understand what they're telling me about why not to or to do a certain thing, but yet I trust them. I've allowed them into that space because I've decided to trust them, in a mature trust sort of way, not naively or blindly, but maturely. And now I can lean on their experiences, and I don't need to go down that path to figure it out myself. I can just say, okay, I trust that, and we're going to do this or not do that. So I think my advice or my takeaway would be for people coming up through any space is, like, don't shy away from things because you think there might be failure in it. Like, you need some experiences too. It's just part of judgment, wisdom, discernment, learning. But don't make mistakes or don't do stupid things just for the sake of doing stupid things to figure out if the stove is really hot. Take the lessons you've learned and apply them across all spaces. You know, the way we show up one place is how we show up every place. And so we can't say, you know, hey, I'm a great leader at work, but we show up at home as a really crappy leader to our family. Like, no, you're not a great leader at work either.
Yeah.
You're masking, or you're not truly running at 100%. So you haven't been exposed yet. And so, like, just be authentic and just be willing to take a failure or step into something that might lead to failure, and then take those lessons and understand that they're for you. And now you don't have to do that again. Now you've got that experience and that wisdom, and you can apply that to 100 different places in your life if you're willing to learn from them. If you're not willing to learn from them, you're just, you know, the lesson will continue until the lesson is learned.
Yeah.
So learn the lesson early and be willing to listen to people who have gone through it. And I'll preface that with this. You need to be really careful about the voices that you take advice from, because I have had a multitude of people in my life who have given me advice and really get upset when I don't take it. And for me, that's been a big meter of learning whether I should listen to someone or not. How upset do they get at me if I don't do it? You know, do they go off the rails, or do they accuse me of being arrogant or prideful or, you know, haughty? You know, I've been accused of all of those things. If they're doing that, they likely don't have my best interest at heart. And I've learned to not listen to some of those people. And so I've kind of learned that I don't take criticism from people I wouldn't take advice from. And so you need to have a circle of people a lot smaller than what you think it is around you that you trust. And there needs to be several different kinds of people in that circle. You know, some peers, maybe some mentees, and maybe some mentors, people that you're walking with, doing life with at some level. But man, be really careful about the circle and who you let in that circle, because not everybody that calls you friend is your friend.
Yeah. Something we say often here is, you know, pain is the path, you know, and one of our values is into the storm. And yeah, that really speaks to me, you know, in just learning the lessons. Don't shy away from the lesson. Don't retreat. You know, lean into it, you know, go all in. So yeah, that's fantastic. And so yeah, some key takeaways would be, you know, lean into the lessons, and then figure out, you know, people who have your best interest in mind, and that care about your success, not rather just them hearing their own voices or seeing someone take their advice. And take the lessons that you learned and apply them to multiple areas of your life. You know, lessons are like paying tuition. Just make sure you don't pay that tuition twice. So, yeah, that's fantastic. So hopefully today, based on our conversation and experience, these are some nuggets, some truths that you can take to apply to your business, your personal life, marriage, friendships, leadership, so that you can absorb them and apply them to your life, and hopefully gain some wisdom and some experience through our conversation, so you don't have to go through as much pain, but you will face pain in your life, and it is important to lean into it. Go into the storm like the buffalo. So pain is the path.
Pain is the path.
Okay. Thank you for your time today. This was Building the Business. See you next time.